Stop delaying important tasks is the foundation of everything you claim you want to achieve, yet it is the very thing most people quietly sabotage every single day. It doesn't look dramatic from the outside. There's no loud failure, no visible collapse. Instead, it shows up in small, almost invisible decisions. You wake up knowing exactly what needs to be done, but you tell yourself you'll start in a few minutes. You check your phone, scroll a little, think a little, wait a little longer. Minutes turn into hours, and by the end of the day, the important task is still sitting there, untouched, quietly reminding you that you chose comfort over progress. Delaying important tasks is dangerous because it feels harmless. It gives you the illusion that you're still in control, that you can do it later, that nothing is lost. But what you don't see is how it slowly rewires your mindset. Every time you delay, you reinforce a pattern. When something feels difficult, you escape. When something requires effort, you postpone. Over time, this becomes your default response, not just in work, but in life. Opportunities don't disappear suddenly. They fade because you were never ready when they showed up. There's always a reason to delay. You might say you're tired, that you need more clarity, that the timing isn't perfect, or that you'll do it when you feel more motivated. These reasons sound valid, even logical, but they are often just polished excuses. The truth is, important tasks are rarely convenient. They demand energy, focus, and effort, and your mind naturally resists that. It prefers what is easy, familiar, and comfortable. That's why you choose distractions over action, even when you know better. The cost of delaying is not just lost time, it's lost momentum. When you don't start, you never build rhythm. When you never build rhythm, everything feels harder than it actually is. A task that could take 1 hour starts to feel like a mountain simply because you've been avoiding it for days. The longer you wait, the heavier it becomes in your mind. It turns into pressure, then stress, then self-doubt. You begin to question your ability, not realizing that the real issue is not your capability, but your hesitation. Important tasks are often tied to your growth. They are the things that move your life forward, the things that challenge you, the things that actually make a difference. When you delay them, you're not just delaying work. You're delaying progress, delaying improvement, delaying the person you're trying to become. You stay stuck in the same place, not because you lack potential, but because you keep choosing delay over action. There's also a hidden emotional toll. Every unfinished task sits in the back of your mind, creating a constant sense of unease. Even when you try to relax, it's there, quietly reminding you that something important is being ignored. This drains your energy without you realizing it. You feel tired, but not because you worked hard, rather because you carried the weight of things you didn't do. This is the paradox of delay. It exhausts you without producing results. Breaking this habit is not about becoming perfect or suddenly feeling motivated all the time. It starts with a simple shift, doing what matters before you feel ready. You won't always feel like starting, and that's normal. The difference is whether you act anyway. Action creates clarity. Action builds confidence. Action reduces fear. The moment you begin, the task loses its power over you. It becomes something real, something manageable, something you can actually move through instead of avoid. You have to understand that waiting for the perfect moment is a trap. There is no perfect moment. There is only the moment you decide to begin. The longer you wait, the more excuses your mind will create. It will always find a reason to delay because that's what it's trained to do. Your job is not to eliminate resistance, but to move despite it. Small actions matter more than big intentions. You don't need to complete everything at once. You just need to start. Even a small step breaks the cycle of delay. It sends a signal to your mind that you are in control, that you don't run from difficulty, that you face what matters. Over time, these small actions build into consistency, and consistency builds into results. When you stop delaying important tasks, you begin to take control of your time, your energy, and your direction. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. Instead of constantly catching up, you move ahead. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, you feel focused. Instead of doubting yourself, you start trusting your ability to act. Delaying may feel comfortable in the moment, but it quietly steals your future. Every time you choose to act instead of delay, you take a step toward the life you say you want. Act without waiting for motivation is a principle that separates those who consistently move forward from those who remain stuck in cycles of intention without execution. Most people believe they need to feel motivated before they can take action. They wait for the right mood, the right energy, the right mindset. They tell themselves they'll start when they feel ready, when they feel inspired, when everything inside them aligns. But that moment rarely comes, and even when it does, it doesn't last long enough to build anything meaningful. Motivation is unreliable by nature. It rises and falls depending on how you feel, what's happening around you, how much rest you've had, and even the smallest emotional shifts. If your actions depend on something so unstable, your progress will always be inconsistent. One day you'll feel driven and productive, and the next day you'll feel nothing at all. If you only act on the days you feel motivated, you're giving up control over your own growth. The truth is that action does not come from motivation. Motivation often comes from action. When you start something, even when you don't feel like it, you create movement. That movement builds momentum, and momentum begins to generate a sense of progress. That progress can lead to motivation, but it only appears after you've already taken the first step. Waiting for motivation before starting is like waiting for a fire to appear before striking a match. There is a resistance that shows up whenever you're about to do something important. It's subtle but powerful. It tells you to wait, to rest a little longer, to prepare more, to think more. It makes distractions feel more appealing and effort feel heavier than it actually is. This resistance is not a sign that you shouldn't act. It's a sign that what you're about to do matters. The more important the task, the stronger this resistance can feel. When you learn to act without waiting for motivation, you begin to weaken this resistance. You stop negotiating with your feelings. Instead of asking yourself whether you feel like doing something, you simply decide to do it. This shift changes everything. You move from being controlled by your emotions to being guided by your decisions. You stop reacting to how you feel and start acting based on what you know needs to be done. Discipline is what replaces motivation in this process. Discipline is not about being harsh or forcing yourself endlessly. It's about creating a standard for your behavior. It means you follow through on your commitments regardless of how you feel in the moment. It removes the constant question of "do I feel like it?" and replaces it with "this is what I do." Over time, this builds a sense of reliability within yourself. You begin to trust that you will act even on difficult days. There is also a mental freedom that comes from not relying on motivation. When you depend on motivation, you spend a lot of time waiting, thinking, and hesitating. Your mind becomes crowded with excuses and doubts. But when you decide to act anyway, you cut through that noise. You reduce overthinking because the decision has already been made. You don't waste energy debating whether or not to start. You simply begin. Acting without motivation doesn't mean you will always perform at your best. Some days your work will feel slow, your focus will be weaker, and your energy will be lower. But even imperfect action is far more valuable than perfect inaction. Progress is built through consistency, not intensity. It's better to show up and do something small than to wait for a perfect moment that may never come. This approach also reshapes your identity. When you consistently act, despite not feeling motivated, you begin to see yourself differently. You stop identifying as someone who needs to be inspired to work and start identifying as someone who takes action regardless of circumstances. This identity shift is powerful because it influences every area of your life. You become someone who follows through, someone who doesn't back away from effort, someone who moves forward even when it's uncomfortable. There will still be moments where you don't feel like doing anything. That doesn't disappear. The difference is how you respond to those moments. Instead of accepting them as a reason to stop, you recognize them as part of the process. You understand that not feeling motivated is normal, not a problem to fix. You don't wait for the feeling to change. You change your behavior despite the feeling. Small actions become your anchor. You don't need to take massive steps every time. You just need to begin. Once you start, the task often becomes easier than you imagined. The resistance fades, your focus improves. and you find yourself more engaged than you expected. The hardest part is almost always the beginning, and acting without motivation allows you to move past that barrier more quickly. Over time, this builds a rhythm of action. You stop relying on bursts of energy and start relying on consistency. You don't need to feel excited to work, and you don't need to wait for the right mood. You create your own momentum through repeated action. This is what leads to real, lasting progress, not temporary spikes of motivation that disappear as quickly as they come. When you act without waiting for motivation, you take control of your behavior in a way that most people never do. You remove one of the biggest obstacles to success, which is the belief that you need to feel a certain way before you can begin. You realize that feelings are temporary, but actions create results. Embrace discomfort daily, because discomfort is not the enemy you've been taught to avoid. It is the environment where growth actually happens. Most people spend their lives trying to stay comfortable. They design their routines, their choices, and even their goals around what feels easy, familiar, and safe. They avoid situations that challenge them, avoid tasks that require extra effort, and avoid anything that makes them feel uncertain. In doing so, they unknowingly limit their own potential. Discomfort shows up in many forms. It can be the mental strain of focusing on something difficult, the emotional tension of stepping into the unknown, or the physical effort required to push beyond your usual limits. It can be the awkwardness of trying something new, the fear of making mistakes, or the pressure of taking responsibility. These experiences don't feel good, and that's exactly why they are so powerful. They force you to adapt, to learn, and to become stronger than you were before. The instinct to avoid discomfort is natural. Your mind is wired to protect you, to conserve energy, and to keep you within familiar boundaries. It interprets discomfort as a signal to stop, to pull back, to choose the easier path. But in the modern world, this instinct often works against you. The challenges you face are rarely life-threatening, yet your mind reacts as if they are. It exaggerates the difficulty, amplifies the fear, and pushes you toward avoidance. Every time you choose comfort over discomfort, you reinforce this pattern. You teach your mind that discomfort should be escaped, not faced. Over time, your tolerance for difficulty decreases. Tasks that require effort start to feel overwhelming, and situations that are slightly uncomfortable begin to feel unbearable. This creates a cycle where you continuously shrink your comfort zone instead of expanding it. On the other hand, when you intentionally embrace discomfort, you begin to reverse this pattern. You show your mind that discomfort is not something to fear, but something to engage with. Each time you step into a challenging situation and stay there, you build resilience. You increase your ability to handle pressure, uncertainty, and effort. What once felt difficult starts to feel manageable, and what once felt impossible begins to feel achievable. Growth is directly tied to this process. You cannot improve without being challenged. You cannot develop new skills without making mistakes. You cannot build strength without resistance. Discomfort is the signal that you are moving beyond your current limits. It indicates that you are stretching your abilities, learning something new, or pushing yourself further than before. There is also a confidence that comes from embracing discomfort, not the kind of confidence that comes from things going smoothly, but the deeper kind that comes from knowing you can handle difficulty. When you face uncomfortable situations repeatedly, you begin to trust yourself more. You realize that you can survive awkward moments, difficult tasks, and uncertain outcomes. This confidence is not based on outcomes, but on your ability to endure and adapt. Avoiding discomfort often leads to regret. The things you don't do, the risks you don't take, and the challenges you avoid tend to stay with you longer than the things you try and fail at. There is a lingering sense of what if. That comes from choosing comfort too often. Embracing discomfort, even when it leads to mistakes, gives you experience, clarity, and growth. It moves you forward instead of keeping you stuck in the same place. Discomfort also sharpens your focus. When you're in a challenging situation, your attention becomes more present. You engage more deeply with what you're doing because it demands your effort. This level of engagement leads to better learning, better performance, and a stronger connection to the task at hand. Comfort, on the other hand, often leads to distraction and complacency. When things are too easy, your mind tends to wander. Making discomfort a daily practice doesn't mean seeking extreme challenges all the time. It means consistently choosing the slightly harder option. It means doing the task you have been avoiding, speaking up when it feels uncomfortable, pushing a little further when you want to stop, and staying focused when distractions are tempting. These small, repeated choices build a habit of facing difficulty instead of avoiding it. Over time, your relationship with discomfort changes. It no longer feels like something negative that must be escaped. Instead, it becomes a signal that you are on the right path. You begin to associate discomfort with progress, with learning, and with growth. This shift in perspective is powerful because it transforms how you approach challenges. Instead of resisting them, you lean into them. There will still be moments when discomfort feels intense, when your instinct to avoid it becomes strong. In those moments, the goal is not to eliminate the feeling, but to stay with it, to continue taking action despite it. Each time you do this, you weaken the hold that discomfort has over you and strengthen your ability to move forward. Embracing discomfort daily is not about making life harder for the sake of it. It is choosing growth over stagnation, progress over ease, and long-term development over short-term relief. It is about recognizing that the path to anything meaningful will require effort, uncertainty, and challenge, and deciding that you are willing to face those things consistently. Build discipline over excuses because excuses are easy, immediate, and convincing, while discipline is quiet, consistent, and often uncomfortable. Every day, you are presented with a choice between the two. Excuses offer relief in the moment. They give you a reason to delay, to avoid effort, to stay within your comfort zone. Discipline, on the other hand, asks you to act despite how you feel, to follow through even when it's inconvenient, and to prioritize what matters over what feels easy. Excuses rarely sound like lies. They come dressed as logic. You tell yourself you're too tired, that you'll do it later, that you need more time, more clarity, or better conditions. These reasons feel valid because they are partially true. You might actually be tired. The timing might not be perfect. But discipline is not built on perfect conditions. It is built on the decision to act anyway, even when the situation isn't ideal. The danger of excuses is not just that they delay action. It's that they protect your comfort while quietly limiting your growth. Every time you accept an excuse, you reinforce a pattern of avoidance. You teach yourself that it's acceptable to step back when things become difficult. Over time, this pattern becomes automatic. You stop questioning your excuses because they feel normal, and you start believing that your lack of progress is due to circumstances rather than your choices. Discipline works differently. It doesn't argue with excuses, it replaces them. Instead of asking whether you feel like doing something, discipline creates a standard that you follow regardless of your mood. It turns action into a habit rather than a decision. This reduces the mental struggle that often comes with starting. You don't spend time debating or negotiating with yourself. You simply do what needs to be done because that's what you've committed to. There is a level of honesty required to build discipline. You have to recognize when you're making excuses, even the subtle ones. It's easy to justify delays and avoid responsibility, but discipline requires you to confront those moments directly. It asks you to admit that you could act, but you're choosing not to. This awareness is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Without it, excuses remain hidden and continue to control your behavior. Consistency is where discipline proves its value. It's not about one big effort or a sudden burst of productivity. It's about showing up repeatedly, especially on the days when it feels hardest. Anyone can take action when they feel motivated or inspired. Discipline is revealed on the days when you don't feel like doing anything, when your energy is low, and when distractions are everywhere. Those are the moments that define your progress. Excuses tend to focus on short-term comfort. They help you avoid effort now, but they often create more stress later. When you delay important tasks, they don't disappear, they accumulate. What could have been handled with a small effort becomes a larger problem. This leads to pressure, deadlines, and a sense of being overwhelmed. Discipline prevents this buildup. By acting consistently, you handle things before they grow into something more difficult. There is also a sense of control that comes from discipline. When you rely on excuses, your actions are dictated by circumstances and emotions. You react to how you feel rather than directing what you do. Discipline shifts this dynamic. It gives you control over your behavior. You decide what gets done and when, instead of leaving it to chance. This control creates stability, and that stability supports long-term progress. Building discipline is not about being perfect. There will be days when you fall back into excuses, when you delay or when you avoid something important. The difference is how you respond to those moments. Instead of accepting them as normal, you recognize them as setbacks and return to your standard. Discipline is strengthened not by never failing, but by consistently returning to the path after you slip. Your environment and routines can support this process. When you create structure in your day, you reduce the opportunities for excuses to take over. Clear priorities, define time blocks, and simple systems make it easier to act. They remove ambiguity, which is often where excuses grow. When you know exactly what needs to be done and when, there is less room for hesitation. There is also a deeper identity shift involved in building discipline. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who does what they say they will do. This identity influences your actions. You don't just act because you have to. You act because it aligns with who you believe you are. Excuses lose their power when they no longer fit your identity. Discipline may not feel rewarding in the moment. It often requires effort, focus, and persistence without immediate results. But over time, it compounds. Small, consistent actions lead to noticeable progress. Tasks get completed, goals move forward, and confidence grows. You begin to trust yourself more because you know you can rely on your own actions. Excuses will always be available. There will always be reasons to delay, to avoid effort, or to choose comfort. Discipline is the decision to not rely on those reasons, even when they seem convincing. It is the commitment to act based on what matters, not on what feels easy in the moment.